Hi, everyone. My name's Anthony Ruggiano, and in 1988, I was struggling with addiction, and I went into a treatment center. I set up a helpline number, which is 855-963-2113. That's 855-963-2113. That number, phones will be manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you're struggling with addiction, or you know someone that is struggling with addiction, please call that number and let me help. I will be hands-on. I will be personally involved in the person's recovery. They will meet me. They will spend time with me, and I will help them live a life beyond their wildest dreams. So please, if you know anybody that has a problem with addiction, or you yourself have a problem with addiction, please call that number. Let me help, and also help their family members or friends. Please call that number, 855-963-2113. That's 855-963-2113. I was living in Michigan. I was 59 years old at the time. I got a call from a friend of mine that I knew that was my sponsor in Narcotics Anonymous, and he called me up and he said, I just became a program director. I came out of retirement. He said, I know you're looking to move here eventually. Are you interested in a job? He says, I just spoke to the owner of the treatment center. I got a counselor's position open. And because of your life experience of how you lived and how you changed and your recovery, like you know how to stay clean, you've been helping people in Narcotics Anonymous for over 20 years. He said, so, you know, you have a lot to give back, a lot to offer. He says, the owner of the treatment center said he's willing to give you the job as a counselor, but you have to go back to school. And the treatment center will pay for the schooling. It's a 15-month course to get a CAC, which is a Certified Addiction Counselor Certificate. I said, okay, because I wanted to change my life. I knew it was a great opportunity. My stint with the FBI was coming to an end, and I knew that, you know, I had to take care of my future, and it was a great spot for me. And because of my life's experience in recovery and in the street, I was fit the profile for the job, because recovering addicts identify more with recovering addicts. So I went down to the state and I got the job as a counselor, and I went back to school, you know, and from being a high school dropout and a criminal, I learned how to write biopsychosocials and do group notes and to sit back in I had my own office, and it wasn't a sports office. It was like a regular office. I wasn't a bookmaker anymore. And we used to laugh because my friend would come into my office and he would say, you know, what's the line on the Yankee game tonight? You know, he would tease me. I became a case manager also. I did that for a while. And now I'm a behavioral health technician because I'm getting older, and so I wanted to slow down a little bit. But I'm still dealing. I still run groups. I still, you know, do all that kind of stuff. You know, I became a member of a 12-step program, you know, in 1988, which is Narcotics Anonymous. I know I'm breaking my anonymity, but, you know, it's my anonymity. You know, in that 12-step process, there's an 8th and 9th step about making amends. I made a list of all the people I have harmed and became willing to make amends to them. That's the 8th step. And the 9th step is I made amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. So when I got to that 8th and 9th step, you know, I had a lot of faceless victims in my criminal career. Like I had stolen car rings because I couldn't, and I had credit card rings, and you know, so I couldn't start ringing doorbells and say, hey, remember in 1985 when you went to work on that cold, snowy morning and your car was gone? Well, we took your car, I'm sorry. You know, so I couldn't do that. So I couldn't make amends to these people because I had so many faceless victims. So my amends is to give back to what was freely given to me. So that my amends was to, you know, the more people I helped, you know, the more amends I felt I made to society. So there was a picture in the Daily News, on the front page of the Daily News, of my father with Robert De Niro in his trailer and this other fella, Charlie. I got in trouble over that photo too, because the FBI, the Daily News, and I don't know, somebody contacted the FBI days before that picture came out. And the FBI called me up because I wasn't supposed to, at that point in time, I wasn't supposed to be doing what I'm doing now. I wasn't supposed to give any interviews or talk to any news reporters because I was still under contract with the FBI. They thought I sold the picture to the Daily News because I had a copy of it and I didn't. There's a picture coming out on such and such a date of your father on the front page of Robert De Niro, a whole big story. I said, I didn't sell the picture to the Daily News, and I didn't. When Robert De Niro was a kid, my father used to go to Jilly's and drink, which was Jilly Russo, who was Frank Sinatra's bodyguard. That's where my father would hang out with Sinatra in Jilly's. So my father was in Jilly's one night, and De Niro was a kid. He was filming Mean Streets at the time. And he came into Jilly's with a wise guy from the Bronx. He introduced De Niro to my father and him, and they hung out together all night. And that was the beginning of my father's relationship with De Niro. And he would see him every now and then, and they would hang out and drink. So he knew De Niro when he was a kid. Moving forward, Nicky Carrazzo, one of my father's main guys, who's a captain now in the Gambino family, his brother Anthony, who passed away, unfortunately, he was a good friend of mine, became friends with De Niro, and he was actually in a couple of movies with De Niro. He was in Bronx Tale, he was like in the bar scenes. De Niro was filming the movie Analyze This in Manhattan, and he invited my father to come to his trailer for lunch because he knew my father just got out of prison. So my father went to the trailer and they took that picture. People think that my father was there to advise him. He wasn't there to do that. And that's how that picture transpired, and that was his relationship with De Niro. When the picture did hit the newspaper, De Niro denied being my father's friend, which kind of hurt me a little bit because that was untrue. Because they put in the newspaper articles, my father murdered 7 people, and it wasn't, and all that. So De Niro sort of tried to separate himself, I guess, and said he didn't know him. But well, what the hell was he doing in your trailer and having lunch? You know what I mean? So it is what it is. Actually, the last time I saw Sonny Franzese was in Suffolk County. Him and I had the same parole officer. So I went up to report that day, and Sonny was sitting in the waiting room. So he saw me and he smiled, and I sat next to him, and he leaned over because I was proposed at the time, and he leaned over and he told me, Joe Carrazzo, who was the consigliere of the Gambino family, he leaned over because he was the underboss, Sonny, of the Colombos. He leaned over and he says, I had a really good conversation the other night with Jojo about you, about me, meaning, I said, oh, thanks. He goes, you're going to get that thing soon. Meaning, I was going to get that thing. I was going to get straightened out. All of a sudden, the door opens and one of the officers come running out and said, you, get on the other side of the room. They saw us talking on the camera and they didn't want us. Then they made me go sit on all the way on the other side. And Sonny goes, all right, take it easy. You don't have to get excited. And I had to go sit on the other side of the room. And that was the last time I saw Sonny Franzese. So, that's what I would like to discuss with Michael, if I ever can. Michael and I, our families go back a long way. We have a lot of family history together. My father was a teenager. He met Sonny. And he hung out with Sonny as a teenager, and he hung out with Sonny when he got out of prison, but he also hung out with Charlie Wagons, and he was also working for Charlie Wagons. But Sonny never put my father on record, but my father and Sonny were very good friends. And when actually my father could have went either way. My father could have went with Sonny or Charlie, but my father chose Charlie. When I got out of prison in the very early 80s, he came to my father and Tony Lee had a gold store in Ozone Park. They were buying gold and silver. They had an exchange, and he came there a few times to see Tony Lee. And I met him in there, and I talked to him, and he used to tell me he had a club in Long Island, I believe, at the time, and he told me to come there anytime I wanted. So whenever we ran across each other, we were very cordial, we were friendly. Throughout the years, our paths crossed, like when we were protesting in front of the FBI building. When we were kids in the 70s, he's a year or two older than me, but we used to go every night. Every wise guy in New York would send buses to the federal building in Manhattan, and we would protest and scream, FBI, Gestapo, the FBI's doing to the Italians what Hitler did to the Jews, and we would hold up signs, and Mikey would have a bullhorn. He was like one of the leaders, Mikey. And moving forward, and it's really something I would one day hopefully be able to discuss with Mikey face to face. So the day of the main event, we were supposed to go to the big thing they were having, and I woke up that morning and I was excited, and I ran upstairs and to see if we were ready to leave. And I went upstairs and my father was sitting at the kitchen table. And I said, come on, let's go. We got to go to the rally. It was the big rally that day. And he looked at me, he goes, no, we're not going. And I didn't know why. I said, what do you mean we're not going? He goes, no, we're not going today. I says, what are you talking about? It's the rally. I said, this is the big rally. There's going to be tens of thousands of people there. I wanted to go. I said, what do you mean we're not going? And he looked at me and he goes, listen, I just told you we're not going. But I didn't understand that. I didn't know why, but we weren't going. That was it. We weren't going. So I didn't go. And later on that day, Joe Gallo got shot at the rally. And Michael was there. Michael was standing right behind Joe Gallo when it happened. The bottom line is, Carlo Gambino probably had to okay that hit. So my father was in the Gambino family. My father knew it was coming down, and Michael's family, which was the Colombo family, they didn't know it was coming down. That's why I stood home and Michael went to the rally. My father did a lot of time with Sonny. They were in a lot of prisons together, and I would always see Sonny. So my faith also led a part in my changing. I don't know, maybe not as much as Michael, but it did. And yeah, I know where Michael came from. Michael had the same upbringing as me. He was raised by a killer, but Sonny was a loving father to Michael, and my father was a loving father to me. But, they were gangsters. Sonny was a famous gangster that knew, just like my father was a famous gangster. And we were raised in that household. And, and my father's a lot like Sonny. He wouldn't take responsibility for the damage he did to his family. My father was an egomaniac. It was all about him. So I could identify a lot with Michael, a real lot with Michael. And yeah, I see what he's doing. He goes around the country, he talks, he helps people, he's got a fellowship, a ministry, and I know where he came from, and I know what it took to get to where he is today, to change it, to give that life up. Listen, my whole adult life, all I wanted to be was a wise guy. That was the hardest thing I ever did, to get away from that life. And I know that probably was the hardest thing Michael ever did, to get out of that life. No matter which way he got out or no matter which way I got out, we both got out. And our fathers had big grips on us. Our fathers, I wanted to be him, and I'm sure Michael feels the same way. My father made a ton of money and I made a ton of money, but, we spent it as fast as we got it, because when you live in that lifestyle, money, you think it's never going to come to an end. But I identify a lot with Michael.